Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. And today it's Birthmother's Day. I've had one fantastic conversation with the birth mother, and now I'm going to have another fantastic conversation with another fantastic birth mother. Welcome to the show, Cathy Vogeley.
Catherine, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Simon. I'm so proud to be here. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for telling this story, for allowing people to come on your show and tell about their experiences and to share with the world basically what it was like for people like me, and for people like Laura. And of course, there are people today who are giving up or who are having their babies taken. And it's an important topic for me, mainly because I have people come to me and say, what's the big deal? It's not a big deal, you know? I mean, you have a baby, somebody needs a baby, and you give them your baby because you can't take care of it or you don't want it or something like that. And then the baby has a good family. And that was actually the idea I had too, as a young woman. Not that it wasn't a big deal, but that my baby would be well cared for and loved and probably have a better life than I had. So that being said, thank you for spreading the story.
So I listened to Catheryn's book on Audible, and you described before we started recording about a pretense about what had gone on. You talked about hating yourself. You talked about crying to the radio, praying for forgiveness, and I remember that long after the birth of Mary Lynn, that was the name that you gave her.
That's right.
Long after that, there's some really tough times when you considered taking your own life, and you ended up in therapy. How long? Because you describe it as PTSD in the book, and that seems pretty valid to me, given the stuff that you went through. How long did it? How long between the birth of Mary Lynn's birth and therapy? How long was that? Because I can't remember.
It was a lifetime. Yeah. Mary Lynn was born in 1969. And I did see therapists along the way in my life, because I knew I needed help. I don't remember much about them, and I didn't see them for very long. There might have been two different people, I think, when I say them. What it came down to for me was I just need to buck up. You know, it was like, I don't know what's wrong with you, little girl, but quit your whining and quit feeling sorry for yourself for no reason. And basically just shut up, stand up, and keep going. And that's the voice.
What you were telling yourself. Sorry.
That was a voice in my head almost all my life. And that, comes from my childhood. And so she was born in 1969, and I started therapy for PTSD. I think it was in 2014.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And it was very serendipitous, that I started seeing this therapist. I was a nurse, and I was working at the VA, and I went to a lecture for continuing ed credits, where this lecture was on PTSD. And I didn't think of PTSD in terms of anything other than military. And so this was in 2014, and I don't know over time how much how much more common PTSD is now than it was then. But anyway, when she started describing, so her context was for war-related trauma. And as she described the symptoms, I'm sitting there in my lab coat, being a professional, and realizing that these symptoms she was describing were me. And I've never been in the military, and I don't have any PTSD. And yet I was struggling. And again, I should have been happy. I had everything. I should have been a happy person, but there was something not right in me. And so I spoke to her afterwards, and she said, sure, I can see you. And so I started seeing her then, and with much trepidation, because I thought of myself as a professional and I don't have problems. Thank you very much. I'm fine. And, I started seeing her. And when I sat down, I was still so clueless. I said, honest to goodness, I don't know what to talk about. And she said, well, okay, why don't you just tell me about yourself? And the first thing out of my mouth was, well, you should know that I had a baby when I was 19 and I had to give her up for adoption. But that's all gone now. It's okay. It's all in the past. And she said, okay. And then I started talking about my father. I mean, that just went, gone. And I started talking about my father, who was, a heavy disciplinarian, and my parents were, I was raised in the 50s and 60s. And at the time I thought they were horrible. And I still think they parented with a heavy hand, but it was the culture back then, despite what we saw on television. It was in households. I think that they probably were a little, like I say, harsher than was average, but I don't think they were terribly different than. I think the difference in my parents was that they didn't give affection too much. There were no I love yous. There was no unconditional love conveyed. And so when I got pregnant, I my shame was just so vast. And nobody ever said to me, it's okay, we'll love you no matter what. There was never that. And there was never any suggestion of, we'll help you, or maybe we could work this out so that you could keep your baby and we can help you with that. There's none of that. Mm-mm. So anyway, back to your question. It was between the birth and the therapy was a lifetime.
Yeah.
It was almost 50 years.
Yeah. So at some point the therapist, did you say before we started recording, it was about was it a year in, and you weren't crying, and the therapist made a suggestion to you? So what was that?
Yeah. It was one of those flashbulb moments that, I say it was like a shot of lightning. Something I'll never forget is that we had gone through most of the hour. Our sessions were an hour long, and so I had gotten quiet, because I would usually talk the first 45 minutes of the session, and then finally run myself out, and then she would have something to say, or I would say to her, now you talk. And so
I remember that from the book. Yeah, that was an interesting one.
And so that day she said, it was very quiet, and she said, maybe it's time to find this person. And I had no idea what she was talking about. And I said, this person? And she said, yeah. And I said, like who? Do you mean Gavin? And Gavin is the baby's father. I mean, that is how buried it was, right? And she said, she just shook her head. And I said, the baby? That's just how I said it. And she nodded. And I think that I was describing to somebody the other day about the fog. You know, they talk about the fog of adoption, and when did you come out of the fog? And I said, I wasn't in a fog. I was in a lead box, a sealed lead box that was so tight that I had no idea what all was there. But when she said that, a crack happened and light started to come in, and it was it was blinding. And it took my breath away. And my first, you know, I don't, who knows why we say things that we do, but my first thing out of my mouth was, but what if she's dead? And she said, but what if she isn't? And I said, I don't know. I mean, it was just such a new idea to me because I had spent my life with those words. Don't think about it. Don't keep going forward. Just forget about it. And so when this person who I trusted, who had helped me, who I respected, when she, you know, authority figure, when she said, maybe you should search for her, it was just mind blowing. And so she said, well, I said, I don't know what I would do with another daughter. I have 2 daughters that I raised. And I said, I don't know what I would do. And she said, what would you want to do? And I mean, this was all so new to me. And I said, I don't know. I guess I would want her to know me because I think it's cruel to grow up, to live your life and never know where you came from. I think that's just cruel. So she said, well, it's not something you have to do. It was just an idea. Give it some thought. So I left the office and I drove home, which is about, it's close to a half-hour drive. And by the time I got home, and I couldn't even remember driving home. I mean, I couldn't, you know, there's a tunnel I go through to get home. And I was on the other side of the tunnels, but I didn't remember going through the tunnels. And I remember thinking, where am I? What in the world? How did I get here? So my mind was just blown. But by the time I got home, I had started. My feet were on the ground and I had to find her. And then I couldn't stop. It just broke open. I couldn't stop.
So you've talked about the fog. So you obviously know the jargon that talks around. What I found fascinating reading the book is that you were a wound specialist.
I know.
And I was thinking, well,
you can't make this stuff up.
I wonder what Cathryn's got to say about the primal wound. You know, because she's a wound specialist. What can we learn from Cathryn on the primal? Yeah, I don't know. There's a question. If there's a question there, I've got a very different. I definitely felt wounded by felt wounded by adoption, but I don't believe that. I don't believe.
You don't believe in the concept of the primal wound.
Well, I think that I think I think I have felt wounded, but I don't think that I have been wounded.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I don't
do you
think
think
we who we are.
Do you think there's any difference between, because we've all been wounded in one way or another, right, throughout our lives? Do you think there's any difference between the wound of, I don't know, let's say bullying, just pick one, the wound of, another kind of wound than the wound of having been given away or taken away? I
Well,
think given, people don't like that word given away, because so many first mothers will say, I didn't give my baby. My baby was stolen. Well, I think that in my case, I can't say that my baby was stolen. I didn't, there was a lot of coercion involved. There was, no choice for me. But the fact that I had to give her away would I imagine to that child, whoever that child is, whether it's you or her or me, there must be a fundamental knowledge that you had parents that you don't have now, that somebody else raised you. And that, so do you see that as isn't that a primal feeling of being wanted or not being wanted?
yeah, it's a feeling.
It's a wounding.
It's definitely a feeling. So
It's a spirit wounding. It's a spirit
well,
wound,
I
which is not physical. You can't
yeah.
put a tape measure to it. You can't photograph it.
So I don't think that I don't think the spirit can be wounded.
So you're talking about when I hear you say that, it reminds me of Freud and the id, the ego, and the superego. So it sounds like what you're talking about is the id, which is the basic human kernel. And so you're saying, tell me again what you.
Well, I don't know anything about Freud, so I like with these
shows
things,
how old I am.
well, no, it's just we're talking slightly different. We're talking about slightly different languages. I the what's the best way to put this? So the vocabulary, to start off with, the vocabulary, this sort of like the given away or the taken, right? Vocabulary sometimes seems really important. It seems really important to us, and people fall out about the exact wording, and do you use the word given away or fallen, given away, coerced, and
Stolen,
sort of
yeah.
stuff, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in that, so in some senses, that we're dealing with we're arguing about vocabulary, and and as I say that, I think that I'm arguing about vocabulary when I say that there's a difference between feeling wounded and being wounded. Feeling wounded and being wounded, right? So we are not our feelings. Our feelings come and go. What is essential, so there's a difference between our experience and our essence. And in our essence, that there are no feelings. I believe what is hurt, what is wounded, is our sense of self. And because I've been bullied and because I'm adopted, I see those two things as the same thing. They are attacks on my sense of self. So when I was having my explosion, when I came out of the fog and I had this explosion, it came out as anger, an explosion of anger. She didn't love me enough to effing keep me, right?
Right.
And the person that I was speaking to at the time said, I'm a mum, Simon, and I don't think it was like that. Okay.
Right.
And the volcano stopped erupting at that point. I had never felt like that before. I'd never given any thought to my birth mother, and I'd never harbored any anger to her before. I was 40, and it came out, right? It came, these words spewed out of my mouth like red hot lava. And as soon as the lady that I was talking to said, I don't think it was quite like that,
Yeah.
the volcano stopped.
Mm.
Right?
The volcano of anger.
The volcano of anger stopped.
Okay.
And I saw the truth.
Mm.
I saw probably 99% of the truth in there.
Mm.
But there was still a lingering doubt that maybe
Mm-hmm.
adoption had messed me up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then a few years later, I was talking to a therapist, and she had a pivotal role in me restarting my search.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a meltdown. I had another similar to the anger towards my birth mother when I was about 4. Well, when I was 40, I had this anger towards my birth mother came out again in this therapist chair. So I sat in this therapist chair. She asked me a question about my search for my birth mother, and I went ice cold with shock. And ice cold in shock. Then I flushed red hot with fear of her rejecting me again. And then something else came in, and I was like, I'm not going to stop this fear from holding me back. And I resumed my search. And then I got the adoption files. I got the letter about the teddy bear that people might be sick of hearing me be talking about. But and I felt, reading that letter from my birth mother, I felt 48 years of 48 years of gap and physical gap between us disappear. And I felt me and my birth mother as one, and the tears that came out of my eyes melted the anger, the 40 seconds of anger that I've had to her.
Wow.
That I've done to her. So, and you know, we're going to get onto your eclipse experience in a minute, because it was similar sort of profundity, I think, for me. So, going back to your question, I don't think that spirit can be wounded, and it can't be wounded because our feelings are lying on top of well, the metaphor that comes to mind is one from the guy called Rupert Spira. So our feelings are like the movie on the screen of our consciousness. So a horror film is very scary, but it doesn't damage the screen. The screen isn't bothered whether it's a horror movie playing, or a comedy. The screen doesn't laugh at the comedy. The screen doesn't cry at the It doesn't cry at the love story with a sad ending, and it doesn't scream when the horror movie is playing. Our feelings come and go. My feeling, some of them hang around for a lot longer. Some of them hang around for a lot longer. So my fear, or my feeling that I'm not good enough at business, for example, that's been around for decades.
Yeah.
So I went off a bit on there. There we are. Does that make?
Yeah, as you're talking, my mind goes to your metaphor, and I see what you're saying. What crossed my mind though was we're thinking of the movie screen as impenetrable, and I know it's a metaphor, so I was thinking of lasers. You know, a movie screen reflects light and what comes through the, I don't know these days how they show movies, but it comes through the projector, I guess. But as you were talking, I was thinking a laser, though, if you put a laser light on that screen, I'll bet it would go right through it. And it would.
Every metaphor has its limitation.
Yeah.
That's
sure. And and that's why I didn't bring it up at the time because you were talking, because I thought, that's kind of arguing with the like you say, with the metaphor, and but again, to take it a little further, using that metaphor, because I'm not 100%. I'm with you on your idea, but I'm not 100% with the entire
yeah.
So, with your concept.
So have you heard me do the diamond thing? Have you heard me do the diamond thing?
I don't think so.
Okay. So I'm holding up a fist.
Yeah.
To the screen, listeners.
Yeah.
And the fist is clenched.
Yeah.
And the fist is the metaphor. And I've got white knuckles, right? It's clenched that much. So that
right.
The fist is my metaphor for trauma, because trauma came out of me in those split seconds as anger.
Yeah.
When we're angry, we sometimes hit people, and we hit people with a clenched fist. So that's so my knuckles are fast. That it's sealed fast, right? There's nothing's getting out, right? And I'm going to do some damage in my anger, right?
Right.
If I unfurl my fingers, you start to see what's in the palm of my hand, which is a glass diamond.
Mm-hmm. And that's you.
That's us.
In there. Mm-hmm.
So that's us, and the metaphor has its limitations. So
that's okay. Yeah, I get
it. This diamond is made of glass, and it was £7 off Amazon or whatever it was. If it was a real diamond, I don't
right.
know, it would be 10 million quid or something like that. But the metaphor is, that, so it depends. But who we are is priceless. Every human life is priceless, despite what life insurance companies will tell us. We'll put a price on our lives. But all your daughters' value to you is infinite. That's the, you know, there is infinite and unconditional, right?
Yeah.
So, and so we're all that, we are all that perfect, shiny diamond with infinite value, not a value by the number of carats that we weigh or anything like that. And yet we don't see it, and we don't see it because of the trauma that hides it. So the trauma that you went through, the complex CPTSD you went through, the primal wound I've had, or the trauma I've been through by being bullied, or the trauma I've been through by constantly thinking that I'm crap at business, and all the mistakes I've made and all the sleepless nights I've had about business, right? So the trauma hides who we are. But with my metaphor, right, however hard I squeeze, close my fist, I cannot damage the diamond. It's just, it doesn't work. My flesh will not impact will not damage, will not ruin, will not discolor, will not, you know, and it definitely won't. It won't, even if I had some rings on, I wouldn't be able to scratch.
No.
Diamond. So I can't wound the diamond. A diamond is unwoundable. And if we switch metaphor slightly and say, the spirit, going over to the spirit here, the spirit isn't a thing. So it's not a thing so if it's not a thing, it can't be cut. And then you can carry on with your wound specialism training, right? So if it can't be cut, it can't be wounded. If it can't be wounded, it doesn't need any sutures. It doesn't need any distilled water to stop infection. It doesn't need any, what do you call it? That plastic stuff, the glue that you use instead of sutures. It doesn't need any disinfectant. It doesn't need anything.
Yeah.
And that's my take on it. Trauma hides who we are. It veils who we are. It doesn't change who we are. Our feelings don't fundamentally change our being. But have I felt trauma? Yeah, you better believe it. Am I denying that trauma is a thing? I'm not denying trauma isn't a thing. My trauma pales into insignificance compared to yours.
Yeah. No, I was thinking of how somebody who is in the throes of
you
the
can't
change.
tell them that. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I was thinking how could this help somebody who is in the throes of it? I think that, people are at different stages of their healing, and there are times in that healing process when an individual is ready to hear what you're saying. And I know when I first heard you on your podcast saying this, I thought that's a beautiful thing. It's to say that you are not your feelings is reassuring, I think. To say that you are a diamond and you are as a diamond is. And, to say that is to say you're beautiful, you're indestructible. And just remember that. That's who you are. all the stuff on the outside is the white knuckled fist that over time you could relax with healing. That fist may relax, and you'll get to the point where that diamond you'll feel it, you'll see it. And that is healing.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
that's why I will see it, now you see it, now you don't. Now I see it, now I don't.
And I was just going to say that. I was just going to say,
now I don't.
yeah.
Now I see it, now I don't.
Right.
But
it's there. But it's there. You have to remember.
No, not in the moment. No, not in the moment. Not in the moment. Not when I'm lost. I'm lost. It's dark. It's dark.
Yeah.
And then would I tell anybody that was in the midst of their trauma, remember you're a diamond? No. Then they're not open.
To punch you in the face.
To punch me in the face. Yeah, that's too right. And they'd be right to do so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the middle of in the middle of here's a story for you, a little story of what trauma can look like. And it's a stupid example in terms of the size of the trauma. When I was 10, I was on a school trip. I lost my rucksack, my backpack, and I was late onto the bus on the way back from the school trip. And another guy called Simon sneered at me as I got onto the bus, and made some crack about. It made light of the situation that I'd lost my backpack, and I just punched him. So people say, "Oh, that's to do with you." That's to do with you. That's to do with being adopted. Well, I don't know. I mean, I say this quite a lot. Shrinks are bright people that can link anything to anything. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
I say it's not. They say it isn't. And then
yeah.
So yeah. You don't tell people that. I don't go around telling people that. But I do go around. Hopefully, you use the word reassuring. I do go around spreading the word of hope, because I believe that the adoption constellation is obsessed with trauma. So all the adoptive parents, all the training for adoptive parents these days is all about understanding trauma, not transcending it, not healing it. All the adoptees groups on Facebook, pretty much all of them, not all of them, but pretty much all of them, everybody is doing trauma bonding. They're sharing wounds, they're comparing wounds. I've been accused of toxic positivity because obviously I've got things wrong, and I've misjudged. I've misjudged the mood. I've misjudged the room. I've been what we call in Yorkshire a dickhead. I've been an idiot. I've misjudged the room. But I believe that we should be trauma informed and hope obsessed. And I think the world, the adoption world, and the adoption industry, perhaps not the industry, but the post-adoption
community
support thing, is obsessed with trauma, not obsessed with healing. And I'm obsessed with healing, and I make no excuses for that. That is my mission. I want to be obsessed with healing and helping people heal and reassuring them and getting them to separate. We are not our trauma. You had that. You had this incredible experience on the eclipse, and I've been ranting on about my stuff for too long of this conversation. It's supposed to be about you, so
that's okay.
Share the eclipse story.
Sure. So I had searched and found my daughter. I live in Oregon. She lives in Georgia. So on the opposite side of the country, it would take a whole day to fly there. She and I emailed quite a bit at first. She was in her late 40s by then. a letter was sent to her by a search agent. And so it was out of the blue, she's just going about her life. And here's this letter. And a letter went to her parents as well. And it took her 2 weeks to respond. She didn't know what to do. And I knew nothing. I had this Pollyanna idea that this is my long lost daughter. I'm going to find her. I'm going to hug her and kiss her and tell her I'm sorry and tell her, we're going to just talk. And then we're going to be really good friends. That's as much as I could think. I hadn't really thought in the future. I just wanted her. So, and I knew nothing about the experience of an adoptee other than what I made up in my own mind. So I know we're kind of limited on time, so I won't go on and on about that, but suffice it to say, we never met. I never saw her. She sent me a fuzzy picture of herself. I never heard her voice. And little by little, she stopped emailing. Then we texted. Then she stopped texting. And this was very hard for me, very, very hard to deal with myself and to respect her wishes, etc. So I was kind of like on this roller coaster ride, I went down and up and down and up and I knew I had to deal with myself as I had all my life, only I was a little bit more healthy now that I had to look at it realistically. And I think the bottom line for me was she didn't have a choice when she was given away. And she had no say in the matter about what would happen to her life, for her life. And so she didn't have a choice when she was given away. And I want her to have a choice now. So if she chooses not to have me in her life, that's her choice. So I went around and around and around with myself on this, So I was doing well. Let's put it this way. I was doing well, knowing that this was the situation and not being able to, there was nothing I could do about it. And I had to accept that. So it just so happened that a total solar eclipse was about to happen in Oregon. Sorry, not in Oregon. It was about to happen. I live in Oregon, and Oregon was a prime place for this to see the eclipse because in the high desert out here in the summertime, it doesn't rain. The skies are always clear. And so there was no chance of, having a cloudy sky. So anyway, my husband and I went to Central Oregon for the eclipse thinking, I heard on the news that millions of people were coming from around the world to see the solar eclipse. And I was like, what? Why? I'm not an astrologist, astronomer. I don't know anything about the stars or the planets, except that, there's a sun up there and there's a moon. And the only reason I wanted to go was because it was a big deal and everybody was coming from around the world. So, okay, let's go. So we have a camper. So we took the camper down there and I thought it was going to be, a big party. And honest to goodness, I did not know what to expect. So, the day comes, the thing starts, you've got these special glasses because you can't look right at the sun. It'll, burn your retina, etc. So there were 6,000 people on this farmer's field where I was. And of course, it was all timed. You knew exactly when it was going to start. And so the sun, in a desert sky, in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the day, or it was 9 o'clock in the morning, the sun is pretty tiny, right? So, okay, there's the sun, and I put my glasses on, and there's okay, it looks like a little bite coming out of an apple, a little as it's coming across. And it moves so slow, the whole thing takes 2 hours. And so in the beginning, I was like, okay, well, well, it's fun to be here, and I'm just enjoying the experience. Well, then it takes the total eclipse is 2 minutes long. So as it approached the time for it to be total, because when it's total, you can take off the glasses and can look right at the sun. So this is a big deal. So everybody's anticipating, everybody's looking up and everything. And my husband's an engineer, and he only went to this field for me because I wanted to go. So he's a very matter-of-fact person. You know, I show him a beautiful sunset, which I always die over. And he says, you know, it's the sun. It comes up every morning, it goes down every night. Yeah, it's pretty. It's pink. Yeah, yeah. So he's very, very practical and unemotional that way. So we go to the end of the row on this camp where these campers are, because I want to have a good view of the sun, which is kind of silly because the sun's straight up. You know, you don't have to go anywhere to see it, but there we were. So you know, it's a big pack of people, and you know, it's getting closer and closer, and the desert was flat, but there were mountains around it. And so you could see the shadow coming over the mountains. And it was pretty cool, really. So we're looking up and, okay, now it's total. You can take off your glasses. And it's hard for me to describe. It's hard for me to describe why it was so moving. But it made me feel, so let me tell you how it was. So it got cool, and it had been very, very hot, very, very hot. Well, this dome of a shadow, and when I say dome, I mean it was dark, very dark, straight up. I could see stars, but around the perimeter of the landscape where I was standing, it was light. So there was this dome of night over us. So it was very dark, or very cold. And so that in itself was amazing. And it was almost, I can't say that I felt like it was an eye looking at me. I felt like it was a miracle. I felt it just took my breath away. It was so amazing to be a part of the universe that way. I mean, it was no longer me on a lawn chair in a campground. It was me as a part of the sun and the moon and the stars. Me, this little tiny ant of a thing, under this spectacular show. So the sun becomes completely black with a rim of light around it, just a sharp edge of light around it. And from that sharp edge of light are these explosions. So tiny shoots of light come out. And it's cold. And I'm just standing there looking at this thinking, you know, I have never experienced anything like that before. It was just so, and it wasn't a concert that I had to pay big money for and find a seat. You know, it was just that. It was almost like God and me and God saying, you're okay. You're the same as every other piece of life in the universe. You are enough just the way you are. And when it was over, well, Charlie and I, we kind of grabbed a hold of each other. And when it was over, you know, you have to, over meaning when the 2 minutes was up, you have to put your glasses back on. And we were both crying. This is my husband who says, yeah, it's the sun. It comes up every morning. It goes down every night. And afterwards, we walked around. I walked around. I don't know. I had to take some trash somewhere or something. And there was a woman standing, she had a pickup truck, and she was standing at the back of her pickup truck. And she was similar to my age. And I don't know why I said something to her, but anyway, she said, is this, she said it was really I said it was really something, wasn't, or something like that. And she said, it sure is. She said, is this the first time you've seen it? And I said, yes. And I just can't get over, I can't describe it. I can't, it's the only thing I can compare it to is seeing the birth of a baby. You know, being a nurse, I have been in the delivery room a couple of times, and I've seen a baby born, and every time I've seen it, it's the same. It just blows my mind. And that's what this was like. And she said, I feel the same way. She said, I have used those same words describing it. She was a nurse also. And that was her comparison, which just, I guess that's the best way I can convey. You know, it was like a miracle, and birth is a miracle too. And I felt almost myself a little bit reborn then. And people have asked me about that part of the book, and how going forward, how did it change me? You know, it was a miraculous vision to see that and to feel that. But I can't say that I became a different person. I'm still me. I still have the same insecurities. I still have the same self-deprecating part of my personality. But I have a higher level of understanding, I feel. I feel like, you know, I've just learned something. I've understood something about, not about myself, but about life, and how impermanent we are, I think. You know, we come and we go, and it just keeps on going. And yeah, so.
Have you heard of other people having similar experiences?
Yeah, this woman I mentioned, this was her 6th solar eclipse. And so there are eclipse chasers. There are people who go around the world following the eclipse.
Yeah.
And yes, it's such a moving experience that yeah, people have said. I don't know that anybody has used those words that I used about you know, like you say, using the diamond in the fist metaphor, we all have our stuff. And, you know, everybody has their own shape of fist.
So I'm going to combine our two metaphors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the mind that's blown away is the fist. It's like blowing on mind blowing, as in taking some. Yeah, I guess the mind that's blown is the fist. So your husband Charlie, he's ultra rational.
Yes.
And his brain was blown out of the way to reveal the love that he is. Yeah. What was going on was what happened in that moment was an ending I was scribbling it down as you were talking, how I saw it, right? It was the ending of a sense of separation. It was a sense, and another way of putting it, it's a profound sense of oneness. So you said
yes,
the same as every other piece on the planet, right? So
I love that, Simon. I love that.
Thank you. I love that you love it, and I want to keep on giving other ways into this stuff, because different people have different ways, right?
Yeah.
So this is oneness. This is the one spiritual being was revealed to you in a world where we are usually, and as you expressed it to me, I felt it too, in a world where we're usually focusing on the 7 billion different human experiences. So this French guy, whose name I should really get to, but obviously I don't care enough about it because I use his quote all the time, but I don't know his name. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're one spiritual being having 7 billion, whatever it is, 9 billion human experiences.
So true.
One spiritual being, separate that, just close that down. One spirit, universe, one song. And it was a peak experience, which is why a peak experience, very out of the ordinary. Even the Eclipse addict, right? She's only had 6 of them.
Yeah.
Eclipse chaser.
Right.
You know?
Right.
She's only had 6. And that felt sense of oneness that you had, that peak experience that you had, that was so out of the ordinary, was the same as what I had with my birth mother. I felt a sense of oneness. I was at one with her, reading a letter she'd written 48 years ago to somebody else, not even me, that I read 14 years after she died. So how on earth could we be? We weren't, you know, she's buried 100 miles away. You know, it wasn't a physical thing. It was a spiritual connection. We were as one together. And it's the same thing. You were standing in a field in Oregon. I was sitting in the spare room that I was using as an office at the time, reading that letter, and the tears ran down my face, and the tears did the healing work. They washed away the sense of separation. So another metaphor that I use on this, I don't know if you heard this one, is the swimming pool that I go to around Christmas time. It's a 60-yard swimming pool. And there's a barrier that comes up from the base of the pool to make the one big pool into 2 big pools, 2 small ones.
Yeah.
So that they can have 2 races going on at the same time.
Yeah.
As I read the letter from my birth mother, the tears that came down were like that barrier collapsing back into the floor of the swimming pool, and 2 became 1. But it wasn't just 2 becoming 1. You mentioned pop concerts. I've had this oneness experience. I've never seen an eclipse. I'm sure I would have pretty much the same experience. But I've had this sense of one experience at concerts, and in rugby stadiums when they've been singing. So there's a connection there. They're singing in a rock concert, and the singing of the national anthems for nations that I'm not even part of, right? So I'm English. I'm watching the French and the Scottish rugby match, and before the rugby match, they both sing their national anthems. I don't even understand what they're singing in the French national anthem. It's like opera, isn't it? Like people go to opera, they're sung in Italian, but everybody's crying. The conscious mind, the brain, has no idea what's going on, but the music touches that part of us that is way beyond the brain. Even Charlie's brain, ultra left brain engineer that he is, and the brain's out of the way, and we're going straight to the heart, and we're going straight to the spirit, baby.
Yeah. I love that. I honestly, thank you. Until this moment, I didn't see that the eclipse was the end of separation. I didn't see that. But it is that. You're right. Thank you.
Have you read Anita Moorjani's book?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I think you might like it. We get it on audio, right? Get it on audio, get it on audio, because she describes. She has a near-death experience. She is on the way out with terminal cancer, like stage 4.5. She's got hours to live. Anyway, for those wondering, she makes it because she wrote the book, right?
That's what I was thinking. Spoiler.
Spoiler, yeah. Listeners, check out the show notes, because Cathryn's book's on Audible, which makes it way more accessible for people like me that are. I'm going on vacation, going on holiday at the weekend, and so I will be doing some reading. But I listen to audios all the time.
Yeah, and it's on my book. I Need to Tell You. It's on Amazon UK as well.
Yeah.
So you can buy it there.
And
it's called I Need to Tell You.
So there's links as I say this a lot, listeners, but if you're a new listener, check out the show notes for every episode, because there's links to the guests' websites. Often they've got books, links to those, links to their socials. There's links off the websites to Amazon and stuff like that. And this eclipse moment, it was totally spine tingling for me, listening to it as I was walking Rosie last week. Yeah, we are all one.
I love that. It's interesting. I want to write a novel. I want to write fiction, because I've always thought fiction would be fun. And writing my memoir, while it was hard emotionally, and certainly I had learn a lot about the craft, the story was all there. And all I had to do was figure out how to put it down and have it make sense. But that last chapter, it's not like I planned to use that. It's not like, and like I said, until just now when I'm talking to you, I didn't see it that way. It was just such a spiritual, beautiful experience that I made the decision to end my book that way. But hearing your interpretation, and it's so true, it's so right on the mark, that it's almost as if, you know, I put something down that I didn't even understand. I wrote something down that I didn't even understand. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know what.
Well,
I didn't see it that way, but
yeah,
it's true.
but there's a huge difference between wisdom and IQ, right?
Yeah.
Spirit and brain.
Yeah. Well, I've heard somebody describe it as emotional IQ. There's a high emotional IQ out there.
Yes, and there's also something called spiritual. So they call it EQ.
Ah.
So there's IQ, EQ. I think there's one called physical consciousness, a physical quotient, but I can't remember exactly that because that didn't really interest me. But there is one called.
I don't have that one.
No, I'm clumsy as hell. Yeah, I'm clumsy. Just, but there is. So I think there's something called SQ, which is spiritual quotient as well.
Mm.
But yeah, so. But it's a felt experience. It's not a theory. You know, like you did a great job of describing it in the book, and I was incredibly taken by all the level of description throughout the book. Actually,
Thank you.
like you talk about, you talked about the views from the window of the therapist room, and stunning detail all the way through. I thought, how does she remember all this? You know, like when you were describing when your mum and dad send you away to stay with somebody, so that they don't have to have so they don't have to feel the shame. It just made me want to be sick. Their reaction to it, where you describe what's going on in the kitchen, and the smells, and the sofa, and sleeping on the sofa. Yeah, incredible descriptive powers all the way through it.
Thank you. There were some pieces of the story that are in my brain, like photographs. They're so real, and they're so sharp, and they're so easy to see. And again, you know, some of this stuff I've written, I had an editor read and comment on that first part where I'm just pregnant and I'm in my dorm room, and I'm laying on my bed, and the way the buildings were, so my bed was next to this window, and then right across the sidewalk was another brick building, part of the hospital. So I'm laying on my bed, and I really did this. I'm staring up at the little aisle of sky that you can see between the two buildings. And I put my hands up. I tried closing one eye to just see the sky. And I put my hands up finally to hide the buildings so that all I could see was the sky. And when my editor read that, she said that metaphor just blew her away. And as I wrote that, I didn't see the metaphor. And as I did it in reality, I didn't think about how I was blocking out all these barriers and I wanted to be free. And so writing the memoir, my writing teacher kept saying to me, Cathryn, go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. And there were times I'd sit at the computer and think, I don't know what the hell, I don't know what to say, and so then these things would come up, and yeah, I and having people like you, like you've just given me this your observation about the eclipse, and her making that observation, it makes me scratch my head and say, wow, I didn't even know that. I didn't, I just wrote it. I didn't even know that.
So I'm going to name check Rupert Spira again here and his metaphor on this, because I'm going to slightly tweak his metaphor, right? So the sky is completely overcast with a cloud.
Yeah.
The cloud is the shame that veils the sky behind. And then you look up, but you're looking up at the sky, and it's been so dark. The world has been so dark. You see a bit of blue, and you think it's a blue cloud. Seems like a good place to bring it in.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Cathryn. Thank you, listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon.